Welcome to Hello You. Yes, you. The podcast that opens up the full spectrum of mental health like never before. We're not here to skim the surface. We go deep into every corner of the human experience. From international athletes to high-powered CEOs, everyday heroes to global change makers. Our guests bring raw, real, and radically different perspective on what mental health really means. This is your space, a place for truth, stories, and connection. Whether you're thriving, surviving, or somewhere in between, we're here to remind you you're not alone. So pull up a chair, take a breath, and let's talk about the stuff that matters. Welcome to the most open, honest, and inclusive mental health conversation in the world. I'm your host, Dan Darwin, and welcome to Hello You. Hello You would like to thank our title sponsors, the Loss Prevention Department at Next PLC. And welcome to another episode of Hello You. And today, my guest is Jayne Clayton. Good morning, Jayne. How are you?
Good morning, Daniel. I'm really well, thank you.
Great. Lovely to have you on the show. And
thank you.
I want to, let's take it back. Tell the viewers, the listeners, a little bit about yourself.
So my name's Jayne Clayton and I'm a menopause wellbeing practitioner. I came to this quite late in life at the age of 56 last year, after a brutal perimenopause and menopause journey. However, things had been a little bit rocky before then. I had my first knock in life age 23 when my dad passed away. So I was, a mum of two little boys at that point. I'd had my first little boy when I was just 17 years old. When people nowadays probably wouldn't bat an eyelid at a teenage mum, but back in the 80s, it was kind of like a big deal, as it were. Mm. And I had to make a decision at that point that I could either sink or swim. And I chose the latter. And, I've really, I would say, put a lot of pressure upon my shoulders to be the best version of myself I could possibly be. And I think that stems from becoming a mum at 17. You get the judgment, you get the looks and things. And it was like I had to try twice as hard as any other mum. Nobody told me that I had to, but I just felt that, sat on my shoulders. So I lost my dad at 23. I coped with that absolutely fine. As I say, I'd got two little boys that I was bringing up at the time. And then I went on to have two other children, another little boy and then a little girl to complete our family, which absolutely wonderful. They're all grown up now. My eldest son will be 40 this year, which is kind of like, a full circle moment for me, for me to be, I'll be 58 the month after he turns 40. So I'm so proud of, the life that I've not just given him, but his siblings as well. And myself, I'm still with my husband 40 years later. Wow. We'll celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary in October. But life became rather messy for me in 2007 and 2008 and beyond. And that was the time when my sister, who was 18 years older than me, I'm the youngest of 7 children. So my eldest sister was 18 years older than me. So I already had a built-in mum. So I thought, my mum was 42, nearly 43 when I came along. So, she was, and again, this day and age, people wouldn't blink an eye at that. People are having children later in life, but, back in the 60s, it was a little bit different. I had a brilliant close relationship with my mum and with my eldest sister as well. And, as I say, it felt like she was a built-in mum. And I thought, I'm not going to have our mum forever. But I've got this, older sister, that can walk alongside me, as a confidant and, as a great friend and support. However, my sister developed breast cancer. And that was back when she was 50, just shy of 50 years old. And she got through it. And, she got to her 5 years cancer-free and went for a check. And they've got a new machine at the hospital, and they said to her, would you like us to, it was an offering, it wasn't a thing, a mandatory thing, it was an offering. Would you like us to, check a little bit further? And she said yes. And then from there on, our lives fell apart really, because she got the phone call to say that her cancer had come back, and not only had it come back, it was terminal. So she felt fine. She didn't feel poorly. There was no indication that this was going to come. Anyway, she very bravely, fought, as hard as what she possibly could. And very sadly, she passed away 2 days after my 39th birthday. So that, as you can imagine, was a big thing. At that point, I'd started drinking. My drink of choice was a Sauvignon Blanc white wine. And I started drinking, and I didn't drink in the sense of, how we can drink in joyous occasions. I think alcohol is everywhere, and, we drink to celebrate, we drink to commiserate, we drink for, anything really, any excuse, and we lift a glass, don't we?
Yeah,
and I
it's
think
our culture,
society,
isn't it?
Yeah, and I think in society, we're encouraged to do so. I think, and if we're not drinking, it's kind of like, oh, why aren't you drinking? As if you're the kind of like the odd one out.
Yeah, I think the drink thing here, and I say it all the time, I think if alcohol hadn't been invented and someone comes up with it tomorrow, they don't legalise it. There is no way. It's the most dangerous substance that's out there. It makes you feel immortal when you have it. But for 6 to 8 weeks after, you've got that depression, you've got all the hormones drops, you've got all the stuff that comes with it. But like you said, it's socially acceptable. We find within our culture, it's definitely a UK thing, that we find a reason to have a drink. And look, I would never say to anyone, let's not drink. But again, I've been where you are. I've lifted that glass, being in the headspace that all I want is to blot the world out. And it's not for enjoyment. It's not to be socially included or that inclusivity. It was to drink until I forgot. And that's the dangerous part of drinking. And unfortunately, it then becomes addictive to feel that way, to numb that way. So I can see where you would have gone down that path. But before we go into that, there's some interesting bits from your story there where you start off. And my mum was exactly the same as you. She had me in 1979 as a 17-year-old. So, although I haven't experienced that stuff, yeah, it was unusual in that era to have children that young, and also for your mum to have children that late. It's the double side of that coin, isn't it? You were looking at both of it. So we're seeing both of that across the eras. And so your dad passing must have been the first brush with death, really, in terms of understanding it.
Yeah, it was. But again, looking at it, when you're 23, you look at it through a different lens as you look at it when you're a little bit older, and you kind of like feel your own mortality, as it were.
Yeah.
So
certainly.
yeah, it was. And it was obviously a shock to the system. But at that age, I wasn't drinking then either. I didn't drink. Once I had my son at 17, I didn't touch alcohol for years and years and years. As I say, I put the pressure upon myself, to be the best version that I could possibly be for him. But when my dad passed away, obviously it was difficult. But I wasn't as close to my dad as what I was to my mum. And I think that makes a huge difference with grief.
Yeah, I think, look, we're not designed to understand death. I think we understand that it's inevitable. And it's going to happen. We know that, right? We know it's going to happen. I think until it touches you closely, we don't fully comprehend it. I say all the time, we're these spiritual beings living a human existence. What we walk around in is our meat suits. They get us around from A to B while we live on this planet, on this rock floating through space. And I think that when we pass, the meat suits return to the earth, and the spiritual side of that returns to the energy of the universe. I unfortunately saw countless dead bodies within my policing career, and it wasn't until I saw my dad's body that I saw that essence had gone, and I realised that I'm right. The way I saw it, the way I deal with it, is that that is a meat suit that we get to wear, and the essence of us, it goes when that body goes. And it was the first time when I saw my dad, and I was just like, there's not him. He's not there. That's just what's left to return to Earth. What was actually him has gone. So death's a strange thing, but like you say, was there a part of you though that, do you think, looking back on it, probably compartmentalized that grief, and it didn't fully show itself at that point?
Oh, absolutely, Daniel. And again, with my sister and my mum, I didn't process the grief again. And I think that's why my menopause was so brutal, because I had that to cut up. That kind of came up. I think, there's a book, isn't there, The Body Holds the Score. And, and I think we can't outrun grief. It catches us up eventually. And, but the funny thing is, I only had my dad, as I say, for 23 years, but I'm a spiritual person also, and I've got a great friend who is a psychic medium, and I've had many, many readings, and on every single one, my dad comes through, and that's quite powerful for me. And in the weeks that he'd passed away, there were things that happened that, there was no logical explanation for, and it was like, whoa. And I found that, a little bit eerie at the time, but looking back now, it would be his sign of, you're going to be all right, and I've got you still, even though you can't see me.
Yeah. And do you know what, I went to see a medium not long after my dad passed. I was very skeptical about that sort of world. I'm very spiritual. I do believe in that universal power that we have, but the medium bit was on my skeptical radar. But there was things in that, although it wasn't my dad that came through until the last 10 minutes, there was things that he was saying that nobody else could know. And one of the funniest things, and I've never told anyone this apart from close friends and family, is when we were clearing out my dad's house, it was only me and one of my sisters there. And now there was a pair of shoes fully boxed, brand spanking new. I don't know why he brought them, because he was in the wheelchair for the last 5 months of his life. And he obviously brought these within the last 5 months of his life. I apologise to Giacomo now, because they probably didn't get the money off of him. But these shoes, I took them. My sister said, do you want them? They've never been worn. He was the same size as you. Do you want them? And I was like, yeah, I'll take them. So only me and my sister knew that. When I saw this medium, he said, your dad's laughing about a pair of shoes that you've taken from the cupboard. And that was what connected me. And I thought, he is still here. Universally, he's still here somewhere, and he's watching over me. Whether people want to believe that or not, that's entirely up to them. But I do believe humans do need hope sometimes, and wherever they find it, fair play to them. And that just, for me at that point in time, because you're right, you can't outrun grief. You just can't. It will catch you somewhere. And for me, that just gave me that little bit of hope, which I needed at that point. So I'm going to come back to your story now, though, and we've moved on, and I think from what I'm hearing already, that grief is there, but you've gone, do you know what? I'm going to be the best parent I'm going to be. You had something to prove because of the era, the time. So you've carried on through. I can only imagine how close you must have been with your sister, in terms of her being your sibling and your mentor and your best friend and your mum rolled into one package because of the age difference as well. Someone to really look up to. Tell me, when that diagnosis went from 5 years clear to actually it's still there, what happens to you? What's going in that dynamic between you and your sister?
It was, I think it was a feeling of, I wanted to protect her as much as, rather than me think about my own feelings about it. I think it was more a lifting of her spirits. And she would say afterwards, that, we'd have conversations, and she'd then, talk to my mum and my brother, and say, that I didn't kind of like go in with a, oh gosh, how are you today? It was more an uplifting conversation that I would have with her. And I buried down inside me my own feelings, you know, and never showed any emotion, whether that's right, whether it's wrong, that's just the way that I dealt with it. Never showed any physical emotion, that what was playing out in front of me was as detrimental as it actually was inside.
I don't think there is any right or wrong. We all process and deal with things in different ways, don't we? And that's what makes us unique as humans. Although I always say we are unique as humans. We do react the same way when it comes to our prehistoric fight or flight built-in things. There's only certain ways we will respond. But we all process things in different ways, whether we push them to one side and think I'm going to deal with them later, or we show no emotion and we shut that bit off for a bit. Because I know, you know, when my dad was dying of cancer, which, and I say cancer's the worst, honestly, to watch people go through that.
Yeah.
And I think I pushed a lot of my stuff down that I really wanted to talk about. I really wanted to, but I had to be strong there for the rest of my family. And I had to be, and I hate this, but I had to be that man that shut those emotions down so I could make those decisions that nobody else wanted to make. And I say all the time, that's not the right way to be as a man. We should show our emotions and that bit should shut off. But it just felt that that was what everybody needed at that time. So I needed to be that person and my feelings had to go to one side. So I can 100% see where you're coming from and there is no right or wrong. What happens next?
Wow, I've just related with what you've just said there, and what I'm going to step in there with is how we are unconsciously given labels in life. So you and I were given a label as being the strong one, and we live up to that label. And what that does in turn is it makes us, you know, very reluctant to show our own vulnerabilities. And looking back now, you know, our vulnerabilities are our greatest strengths, and they're what, you know, connect us with other people and what make us relatable with other people. But by giving that label as the strong one, we, you know, we live up to that, don't we? Until we know, you know, a better way of dealing with it. So, you know, what happened after that, you know, and you can imagine as well, you know, at this point, I'm bringing up 4 children. You know, I've got 4 children and a husband at this point. I've got a mother who's 82 years old who's going to lose her eldest child. You know, my sister's got 2 daughters herself, you know, so, you know, there was a lot going on.
Yeah, and that when you get that terminal diagnosis, everybody is then distraught. And we do go a little bit into self-preservation. How is my life going to change because of this diagnosis? And I don't mean that we don't care about the person who's had that diagnosis. We just don't know how to understand it and what it's going to change for us. And humans don't like change. We hate it. But there's so many different emotions that every person that you've just spoke about is now going through. The dynamics are shifting everywhere, aren't they? In terms of... And how do you support? You have already hit the nail on the head. You are the protector. You're the strong one. You're the one that's going to pull everyone through this, right? So how do you then balance all of that, those dynamics shifting, all those emotions that everybody's struggling with right at that time? How did you deal with that? What did you do?
Jayne, it never got to a stage where I became an alcoholic. It never got to a stage where it affected my role as a mum, as a wife, as a daughter, as a sister. It never affected any of that. And I think that is because of my sheer resilience and strength as a woman, or a gentleman, you know, whoever's going through it. But I think if you've got that true grit, you know, and it became what I describe as a numbing tool. You know, a softening of feelings that I didn't know how to process. You know, we don't get a book with grief. No one comes and knocks on your door and says, this is what you're going to go through. This is what it's going to look like. You know, and the 2 people who were my go-to, which my mum and my sister, you know, they weren't available for me to go to anymore. So I describe it as like being in a boat on a rocky sea with no anchor. And it was like, the wine became the anchor for a short space of time. And, you know, even, you know, the sound of the wine sloshing into the wine glass, you know, at night time. I'd never drink during the day, but at night time, it would automatically indicate to my nervous system that you're going to have a little bit of relief for a little while. It's not going to feel as, on fire, and, you're not going to feel as if you're on red alert for a little while. But of course, you're going to feel awful the next day. Wine, like you've said, alcohol is a substance that, is so readily available. And, as I say, it's almost celebrated if you do drink, and, if you're ready to go home from a party, it's, let's have one for the road, and things like that. Whereas now I'm almost 4 years alcohol free, and I can see the other side of it. And, but as I say, I don't have anything against the fact that I did drink at that time. And I'm really proud of myself looking back, that that's the only thing that I did against myself at that really difficult time, which then they went on, with my sister passing away, as I said before, 2 days after my 39th birthday. And then I lost my mum 3 weeks before my 40th birthday the year after, so there was no time to grieve for my sister, because not long after, my mum was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And it was, oh my gosh, and I remember at that time, Daniel, at the time when she became really poorly, we didn't have really very long, which I see now as a beautiful gift, because you think the longer something goes on, the more impact it has upon you, and, when you've got 4 children to look after, for instance, and you've got a mum that lives 5 minutes down the road. And I do remember my youngest, my daughter, was starting high school in the September, and my mum died on the 21st of August. And through that summer holidays, we have a traditional 6-week holiday here in the UK. And during that holiday, I was split between my children. Where are we going today? Of course, they wanted, to go out with the mum for day trip. My mum wanting me there, and by this time, she'd lost the ability to know, what it meant for me to be there rather than being with my children. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a selfish thing on her part.
It's that circular life where they have us and we're totally dependent on them.
Yeah.
But it goes back round the other way, doesn't it? And certainly when they're ill, they need us and they are dependent on us, and that becomes their life. And that's as far as it goes. And like you say, it's not selfish. It's the fact that their needs need to be met at that time. And yeah, life, everything else is irrelevant then. And that is what we have to do, I think, as it depends what type of person you are, I guess, like you said earlier. But it's definitely myself and my siblings. My siblings more than me, to be fair, had to step up when my dad was ill. And my dad was saying to me all the time, I know you've got to work, I know you've got to do this, but you've got to step up to the plate there and do that thing and take care of them. And life gets put on hold. But I think, like you were saying, life is very short. Time is irrelevant. It's about the impact that they have on your life. And I think sometimes I sit there still. Grief for me isn't over. And you're right, there is no pattern to it. There is no book out there that says this is how you must deal with it. There's the 5 stages of grief. I think I bounced around them for a long while. And with my dad, with his cancer, he had overcome testicular cancer twice. And I thought, he's going to get through this. And I think now looking, that was the denial. Maybe at times I'm still in denial. I don't think there is a pattern for grief, and I don't think it ever goes. But I just realised, life is really short, and it's about the impact we have on each other's lives. That's what matters. And it's not about the length of time you spend with someone. But I do sit there still thinking, I wish I had 5 more minutes with him. And I think that's the part of grief that I can't get my head round. The bit I'm never going to speak to this person again, or share a cup of coffee, have a joke, one of those quick phone calls where it's just like, oh, what you been up to? And they're the bits. And I think they're the bits that maybe it's really human. It's the connection part of human. But they're the bits for me in grief that I just can't get my head round. let alone where you've just lost two of the most influential people on your life in such a short space of time. I can't even begin to think how you must be processing that. Is drink still involved there as a coping mechanism?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I'm going to step in there and say, when you know that your loved one is going to pass away and it's inevitable, I think we start grieving before they've actually passed away. I think we grieve, we kind of jump forward as well in our minds, and we kind of because it's really scary, isn't it? It's a really scary thing, the unknown. I mean, some people like not knowing what's going to happen, but for me, I liked an element of control. And obviously I didn't know when the phone call was going to come about my mum, and I'd already lost my sister by this point. And, in my mind, I went through, we really torture ourselves, don't we? We go through every single scenario. When's it going to be? How am I going to feel? Am I going to have it in me to be able to be there, if it plays out that way? But I do believe that, when it did happen, and the phone call did come, and I think something within us takes over, and we're able to get through that time. Well, for me, it was, I'm going to describe it as a beautiful privilege to have been able, to get that call, to go to the hospital, to be with my mum when she passed away, to witness it, to hold her hand, to allow her to pass away, to give her permission. I see that as a beautiful privilege, and there was no hysterics. And again, everybody deals with it in a different way, but there was no hysterics, there was no wailing, there was nothing, I don't think there was even a tear at that point, Daniel, but my God, there was a sea of tears afterwards. And I think that was me holding it together for my mum to pass to the other side as gracefully as she could. But then, we talked then about the alcohol. So this happened just after midnight, and we stayed in the hospital a little while. Some of my siblings were there. And then we had to drive home, and I was handed, I'm the youngest child, remember, but I was handed the bag of my mum's belongings to bring home with me. And that was like, whoa, I'm bringing this home, and, this is the last part of my mum, and I'm bringing it home with me. And I remember saying to my husband when we got back, I've got children, remember, I've got to tell them that the grandma's passed away. They adored my mum. And I said, put that bag underneath. We've got a cupboard under the stairs. And I said, put that bag under the stairs. I said, because I don't want the children to, oh, what's this? And have a little look. You know what I'm saying. So it was put it under there. And do you know what? That bag still lives under my stairs. And it was in 2008 that it was placed there.
So it's lived there for quite a while. It's still part of you.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful reminder as well that there's so many difficulties in what we have to deal with when it comes to death, including giving that death message to other members of the family, which is tough in itself, puts a lot of strain on you. Watching their reaction and their process, them dealing with it again, is hard. But it's almost like that bag became your little security blanket that sits there under the stairs to remind you, actually, it was a privilege. It was a beautiful moment of your mum passing.
It was. And I remember coming back home from the hospital and saying to my husband, who was with me, let's stop off at the garage because I know I've not got any wine at home. And that was the thought in my head at that time. And of course, it was 4 a.m. They weren't going to sell me any wine. They weren't going to give me any. And I knew that, I'd got other things at home, brandy that maybe I'd use to put in a cake, but I wasn't going to touch anything like that. So I dealt with that cold turkey, as it were, the initial shock of the grief. I dealt with that cold turkey and obviously didn't get any sleep. And then had to get up the morning after and tell my children about the grandma, and they were absolutely distraught. They did have the instant reaction that I'd not had. The tears flowed instantly for them. But for me, they didn't still. And I think that again was holding it together for everybody else. Looking back now, and where I am right now in my life, it makes me feel really sad for myself at that point, that I didn't feel able to express the sheer hell that I was going through.
I think it's a strange one, isn't it, when we look back at stuff like that? And I would always say to people that you can't be hard on yourself, because that was your natural reaction to protect yourself. And look, we need emotions. We stifle these down sometimes, but we do need them, however they present, because what they do is they protect our brain to allow us to process what's going on at that period in time. And I do think that, look, your brain dealt with it how it had to deal with it to be strong for everyone else. And there's nothing wrong in that, because you're now feeling your emotions now. So I think that maybe you're being a little bit too harsh on yourself looking back and feeling sad, because I think you did everything that you needed to do for everyone else, which is an amazing thing to do, to protect everybody else and to give them that support. But losing two people in such a short space of time that have such an influential part of your life, and you talk about the boat, and not only, you're using alcohol as your anchor, but you've just lost your crew. So now you're sailing on a boat. And how does that move forward in your life? Because this is 2007, 2008. What happens in those following years as you sailing on this boat now? How long does the alcohol stay as your anchor? When did you realise that that's a bad coping strategy?
It lasted a long time. And I never reached out for any help. I know there's bereavement counselling out there. I know, the GP would have been wonderful. But again, I was the strong one. I wasn't going to show that I was vulnerable. I was going to show that I could deal with it and I could get through it. And I did, in the way that, that I could. But, the wine, as I say, it then became the norm. It became a normal part of my routine. I wouldn't drink every night, but probably 5 nights out of the 7, I would reach for that wine. And, going to the supermarket, that would be on my mind. I've got to get my wine. Whereas now, I go to the supermarket and never even go down the alcohol aisle, which, it makes a massive difference. So that went on for quite a while. And then at the age of 46, then I became a grandmother for the first time. And at that time, I also started struggling with what I now know was perimenopause. And again, the alcohol helped with that. But as I said before, the symptoms were, in my opinion, were exasperated because I'd never dealt with the grief of losing my dad or my sister or then my mum. And so I was still, drinking, not as much at that point to block out, because there was nothing much to block out apart from these symptoms that I were experiencing. The worst being insomnia, where I couldn't sleep. And it was a different type of insomnia than anything I'd ever experienced before, because obviously I've said before, I've had 4 children, so I've been up in the night looking after babies that need feeding. Yeah. And I think our sleep goes out of the window for quite a few years with that. But this was something different. And the thing that was different about it was that I also had anxiety and panic attacks alongside not being able to get to sleep. And my mind was working at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but not able to process things, if you like.
So for me, having dealt with a lot of mental health stuff over the years, I understand that testosterone drops, for example, in men can really deeply affect their mental health, because it affects their sleep patterns. Sleep patterns play massively into how we deal with stress and how we hold on to stresses. And then it will manifest from there into depression, anxiety, panic attacks, some of the symptoms that come with depression and anxiety. Now, I understand that fully in men. So my connection with the female side of it now, I'm looking for this education from you, Jayne. Explain to me what perimenopause is, please.
So perimenopause is the period of time before actual menopause. So menopause is a time when women's periods stop. And also, the hormones are significantly depleted. So you've got estrogen and you've got progesterone, and, the levels of those during the years leading up to menopause, they fluctuate so much, from one day to the other. So if you got tested, let's say on a Monday, they might say, oh, you're not going through perimenopause. But then by the Tuesday, if you got tested again, oh, well, yes, you are. So it's kind of a really uncertain time for a woman. And it's one that brings there's so many symptoms, and not every woman goes through it the same. Some women go through it rather gracefully. They have a few hot sweats, and they're fine. But for me, mine was really, really, really severe. However, again, I got through it the best way that I could.
Yeah. And well, just those hormones alone dropping have a massive impact on how you produce serotonin and dopamine, which are the happy chemicals in our brain, to put it any other way. They're the things that when they put you on antidepressants, they chemically reproduce in your brain. So you've got that going on. Was it early? I don't know if that's an early time to develop it at 46. When
Not really, Daniel. The average age for menopause, which is the period after the perimenopause, and perimenopause can go on for 10 years before you reach menopause. And menopause is just basically classed as it's one day. It's one day after 12 months without having a period and on that day when it becomes 12 months, that is menopause, and that is one day. And then after that, it's classed as post-menopause. And many women can struggle with post-menopause as well. They can still be struggling into the 70s, dependent upon, how much understanding they have in it and, whether they've reached out or whether they're on HRT or anything like that, that can have such a massive effect. But for me, at 46, I didn't have a Scooby-Doo that this is what was happening to me. And I just thought, I've just been, working too hard. And so what we do in this scenario, I think sometimes we work even harder, and we wear, our busyness as a badge of honor of, I've been doing this, this and this, rather than, listening to our bodies, which are so amazing. We kind of like try and outrun, what they're trying to tell us. And then another symptom, a bit stronger, will be put in place to say, hey, hello, you didn't listen then. And eventually I suffered from burnout, nervous breakdown, whatever you call it. But I was really struggling at that point.
Yeah, because I do understand that the menopause effect, losing those hormones or having depleted levels, is certainly going to lead to mood changes, isn't it? And with those mood changes, becomes less resilient to stress. And the more we hold stress, the harder it gets to deal with. And like you say, our bodies are amazing. Yeah. We've got the best computer in the world that sits in our head.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if we allow it to think, maybe not. Thoughts good, thinking bad. That's the way I see it, because we run those scenarios. But it has this amazing way of saying, slow down. We're giving you warning signs here. We're putting these bumps in the road. Are you going to listen? And if you don't, it then manifests somewhere else, doesn't it? Physically, mentally, emotionally. It will find a way to come out and to say, look, I've been warning you. I've been telling you this stuff. So for you, you try to outrun it for as long as possible. Yeah. Pretty much looks like that's your character. The underlying bit is, this isn't going to beat me. No matter what it is, this is not going to beat me. Whether it's, I've had kids when people are saying at 17 I shouldn't be having kids. I'm going to beat that and be the best mum ever and prove you all wrong. The same as, my body's telling me a few things. No, I'm going to push it harder and outrun it. So it ends up in burnout. And a lot of women out there are probably going through this right now, aren't they?
Yeah.
And what would be your advice when these warning signs start to come up?
Listen to them and, lean into them rather than pushing them away and trying to, do more. I would say, that is the most important time for you to start and implement your own self-care and really look after yourself. For me, This is what I do now, in my business. And, this is what transformed me from where I was to where I am right now, along with a few other things. But, looking after ourselves is so, so important. Sometimes people think, gosh, how selfish. You could be doing that. You could be, cleaning your house, but instead you sat reading a book. What do you think you're doing? And that would have been me back then. Whereas now I know that, we need to keep topping up our tank and resting before we reach a point where we just flop and there's no other choice.
Yeah, and I think you are the shining example of what I say to people all the time is that, look, you can pour your energy into people's cups all day long until their cups are overflowing. But sometimes all that does is leaves yours depleted. And I don't ever see it as being selfish, although you do have to be a bit selfish with mental health and with these changes that happen to us as we get older, men and women, but specifically women going through menopause, noticing those signs. The selfish part is putting a boundary in place, saying, this is my time now to look after me. And I need that, whether it's 10 minutes or an hour, I need that time to replenish my energy levels. And it is important, and it is understanding that it's not selfish because we only get one life and we only get one brain. We only get one body. We only get one attempt at it. So it's not selfish. It is, but it's switching that perspective, isn't it? And what you do now, how would you say to someone, this is how you identify the warning signs. These are the warning signs. What would someone who was going through this perimenopause right now, how would it manifest in certain ways? I'm not saying it's the same for everybody, but what sort of warning signs should they be looking at?
As I said before, it would look different for every woman. But the classic signs are, insomnia, struggling you might be able to get to sleep. But, for me, that was the most brutal part. If I slept an hour a night, I would be lucky. And you imagine the knock-on effects of only sleeping an hour a night over a course of, quite a few months. Brain fog, you lose your identity, your confidence, your kind of anxiety, whereas women may not have experienced anxiety before, with the lack of the hormones, anxiety creeps in and you become fearful of things that, you sailed through before. So it's like a real shock to the system of how you're feeling. And as I say, you think, oh, it's my fault. What have I done? Or circumstances within my life? Is it because of that? And at this time in life, we could be looking after elderly parents. We can still be bringing up children. So we've got a lot on our plates already, and then perimenopause presents itself. And, we just feel as if we lose ourselves and we're completely out of whack. That's how I would describe it. And then for me, struggling with that. And then I went to the GP, and again, the strong one never went to the GP. And they said, oh, you never come here. So it must be something that, you really want us to help you with. And I was let down so badly. People often don't sleep. There's not a pill for everything. And perimenopause was never, ever mentioned to me. And so again, I just thought, it's just, everything collectively that's happened through the years that's, displaying itself in this way. So again, just carry on and carry on. And then in 2020, my brother died of a brain tumour. So as you can imagine, on top of everything that I'd already experienced in life, and my brother was a year older than me and we were close. And, we knew that he was poorly, probably only for less than a year before he passed away. He lived away. He didn't live, close by. And, with that, Daniel, it was like being faced with that again, having known how detrimental it had been before, and something within me, I'd be he was 52, I'd be 51 at that point. And something within me changed, and I can't tell you what it was, but something shifted, and it was a mindset then of, I'm going to deal with this differently to how I dealt with it before. And as you know, the year of 2020 was the year of COVID.
Yeah, that dreaded
so my
time.
brother died in January, and then in March we were in lockdown. And, you know, for a lot of people, COVID was frustrating. They couldn't go out. They couldn't, you know, live their lives like they wanted to do. For me, it was the greatest gift I could have been given at that time, and I'll explain why. Because when you're in grief and you still expect it to perform, as it were, you know, and to go to here, go to there, can you do this, can you do that? All that was taken away. You know, there was no invitations to decline. You know, there was no favours to, you know, decline or to accept. You know, there was nothing. It was just pulling back to being able to heal in my own time and in my own way.
There's a couple of bits I want to touch on there. The first one, COVID was such a strange time, and you speak to different people and they have different perspectives of COVID. Some people, you know, it took loved ones away from them that they lost during that period that they could never say goodbye to. So they have different grief. You have people that it just destroyed their life in terms of took their business away, and they've never recovered from that. And they probably never will. And it's really strange now that we live with it as a day-to-day. You know, people not even testing for it, yet other people have lost so much because of it. Yet there are the positive sides that, for one, it allowed you that time to process grief again for the third time. And I'm sure that with that, because of the age difference between you and brother being close, there was those questions about immortality and your own mortal coil coming up. You know, lots of stuff that you had the time without pressure to adjust, deal with. But the bit that I sort of want to go back to is where you were talking about something within you changed. And I'm assuming the perimenopause there was giving you all different feelings, all different things going on in terms of the burnout side of it, anxiety, panic attacks, thinking your body had failed you. And then just as you're going through that and trying to adjust, life comes along and says, here, have a little bit more grief to be thrown on top of that. So what was it? I know you said you can't describe it, but what ignited the change in how you were going to deal with it? Was it an epiphany moment, or was it over a period of weeks?
It was something that happened kind of like really quickly. And it was kind of like a realization that, you know, life can be taken away from us, you know, in an instant, you know, and as I say, he had a brain tumor. We knew, you know, that he wasn't going to survive it, you know, but it was a case of, you know, do I want to spend the rest of my life, however long I've got, being sad? Or do I want to, you know, try a different route this time? And which I did. And I'm going to tell you what happened with that. And that'll tell you even more about, you know, my strength of character. So COVID, you know, March, we were all in lockdown. And I thought to myself, I was in the grief of losing my brother, you know, the fourth loss that I'd had, you know, of family members. And I sat down one day and still struggling with perimenopause quite badly as well. And I thought to myself, yeah, I feel really horrible and really awful, and, you know, all this is going on. And I thought, but there'll be people worse off than me. You know, I've got my health, albeit limited a little bit because of the perimenopause, but I can still go out for the walk. If you remember, we were allowed out for one walk a day. And I thought, what can I do with that one walk a day to help other people? So, Daniel, I'm a bit of a baker, or I was a bit of a baker, and I decided that I was going to bake goods and leave them on the doorsteps in little packages of people who were self-isolating and who couldn't go out for that walk. And then I'd ping them a message on Messenger, on Facebook or whatever, to say, I've just left you a little thing on your doorstep just to make you smile. And that, you know, I did that, and that just grew and grew, and it ended up where I gifted 250 people, you know, these homemade baked goodies from my own money. You know, I bought the ingredients, did the baking. My kitchen was like a bakehouse. But what that did, it gave me a purpose to get up and to do this for good for other people. So I
Yeah.
gifted then to the hospice where my sister had passed away.
Amazing.
And they have like a Facebook thing, and I became like a local celebrity, with my picture on there and how kind. And I'd written a note to say, it was 2007 when you looked after my sister. It's now 2020, but it's never too late to do something in recognition of what someone's done for you or your loved one.
Yeah.
And what I will say by doing that, it gave me a purpose, something to do. And then by the time I lifted my head up, it was May by this point. And the grief, of course, it was still there, but I describe it as it was much more graceful in its presentation. And it was much more of, my gift for baking became so beautiful for other people, and it gave them joy. And in turn, it gave me joy back within my own life. And it wasn't a denial. It wasn't the denial of, I'm doing this to, what we've said before, to keep busy, busy, busy. It wasn't that. It was different. And from that point, my life changed so significantly for the better.
I want to say that is amazing, because as coping strategies go, we've spoken about the alcohol, the bad side, and the one bit that people don't realise how good a coping strategy is to give back to your community, to do something for someone else with no reward for it. Yeah. And what you did there, it would have made so many people smile and feel happy and feel connected at a time when we didn't connect. And humans need that connection. We're not built to live how COVID had us. But just giving that little bit back just shows the community, shows the connection. It shows truly what I believe humans are. And I do believe 99% of humans are good. I do believe that we've got that we want to help each other survive. We want to see each other grow and prosper. And I have to believe that, because that's what gives me hope. But giving back is such a good coping strategy, to volunteer, to do something like that. And at this point as well, I'm going to thank you very much as well. Hospices do not get enough congratulations, recognition, support, money. They certainly don't get enough of that. My dad was unlucky that he got a bed, but he passed away before they could get him in. So I do as much as I can now to try and raise money for hospices, because they are severely underfunded, but they do such a vital role in looking after people and not just the people that are passing, the families as well. They play such a pivotal role in making that as pain-free as it can be in terms of what is going on at that person's time in life. So hospices need a lot more support, and if more people could do stuff for their local hospices, we can help a lot more people have that beautiful passing, that supported passing, and we do need to do more of that. So from the bottom of my heart, I say thank you for that. It's really inspiring.
Thank you.
And especially, like you say, at a time when there's so much going on for you. So I'm going to ask you now, you've said you were 4 years sober. You found these other things.
Yeah. And
you've moved into helping people that are now going through something that you went through. Maybe not to the same extent, but every woman has to go through this at some point, don't they? So tell me a little bit more about what you would be saying to people, because I understand the GP failed you. I do have a lot of respect for the NHS and for GPs. They are massively overwhelmed and underfunded. They do not get enough time. 10-minute appointments is not enough time to understand what's going on in somebody's life, because life is so complicated. And we do see a lot of people slip through the net because of that. So if someone come to you that says, I've been to my GP and they've just dismissed me, what would you be saying to them? What is good things that can help them? What are good coping strategies? What are things they can do for themselves to help them in that meantime?
the main thing is to regulate your nervous system, because your nervous system at that time is completely out of whack. And, if you've got a nervous system that's really, really jangly, it's going to throw out all the symptoms that we described before, the panic attacks, the anxiety, the lack of sleep. So it's being kind to yourself as much so as you would be to someone else. And I think, I'm speaking as a woman, and I think as women, we spin so many plates, and we want to be the best that we can for everybody else, but we kind of forget about, our own well-being and how important it is. And it's bringing it back to basics, Daniel, to try and get enough rest to be able to nourish yourself with some incredible, fresh food, and I think at that time, we can skip all of that and see it as irrelevant, and movement, getting out in the fresh air, going for a walk. It doesn't have to cost an absolute fortune, and to delegate jobs. I think we feel as if we've got to do every single thing ourselves or the world is going to cave in, but, we might have, a teenage kid that would be grateful for a few pounds, to do a job. Or we may have elderly parents, who, if you gave them a job to go up to the post office, it might give them a purpose for that day. Whereas for you, it would have been something extra to add on your to-do list when you're already depleted. So I think I describe it as that we need to try to create pockets of time. And then with the pockets of time that we've created, to try and really think what we used to enjoy doing, and we kind of meet ourselves, or I have met myself probably for the first time at the age of 55. I'm 57 now, and that was because of the strategies that I put in place. And I don't mean this in a way where everything else in life falls apart. You don't become so self-centered that you still, for me, for instance, I still look after my grandchildren. And I still, there as a support for my family, absolutely. But it is, for me, it was so important to be able to look at what I can give back to the world with the gift. Because I believe that we all come here with a gift. We all possess a beautiful gift. And I think if we can access what that is, we work from a place that feels aligned with our beliefs, and it fills that cup up. Like we said before, it's not an emptying of the cup, it's a filling up of the cup. And then with the overflow from that cup, that is where I then help other people.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you're going to say to people that you've got to embrace the vulnerability, because that is our strength.
Yeah, we do. And I think, as I said before, people relate to, if you meet someone who, they say they've got the perfect life and they've not been affected by anything, you don't have the same, connection as you would with someone who, for me, with my profession, I don't just bring professional expertise, which I worked so damn hard to get, but I've also got the lived experience, which I think is even more important, because you've walked the walk, you've walked the walk, and there's nothing that can compare to that.
No, and I agree. I think the academic stuff, kudos to everybody that goes out and learns and gets the academic learning behind them. I do it, I study, I like to do that, but I do believe there is a strength in giving the keys to somebody who's lived in the asylum to walk other people through it, because life is hard. And I think that lived experience gives other people inspiration and hope at a time when they think there isn't any. And we can, and I think that's what we can do, and we can give back. We can give that back to people. And for me, that's why your story's been so inspiring to listen to today, Jayne, because life is tough and we get a lot thrown at us, and you've had an exceptional amount thrown at you, and your resilience shines through. And now I think you're being a beacon of light to other women that are feeling that their bodies are not doing what they wanted them to do anymore. And having someone to guide them through that at a time when you feel that way is essential. So thank you for sharing your story with me today. If anyone does want to reach out to you, where's the best way to connect with you, Jayne?
I'll also add this at the end, Daniel, as well.
Yeah.
You know, with my work now, I don't only work with women. I work with organisations with all genders. And I say, you know, that menopause is not just a woman's issue, it's a workplace responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I educate, you know, men as well. And I think that that is such a vital thing to do, because I think, you know, if, you know, men have the understanding, they take that back into their own lives as well. You know, they may have wives, girlfriends, you know, sisters. And, you know, if they're educated in what is going on, you know, with women, and it's not, you know, we don't want people to feel really, really sorry for us. It's just an education of this can happen. And I work with with organisations, you know, whereby, you know, having this information and education can mean the difference between a woman who's been in that job for decades, staying in that job, or walking away because she doesn't know what's happening and there's no, you know, support or understanding in place. So, you know, so that's why I do what I do. And that makes my work a little bit different, you know, from some menopause practitioners, because, you know, I bring everybody into the conversation. As I say, I think that that is so important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
With regards to where you can find me, sorry, I digress. You can find me I'm a member of the Complementary Medical Association. And if you go on their website and type in my name, Jayne Clayton, you will find me there. And also on my Instagram business account, which is Jayne Clayton _coaching.
Thank you very much, Jayne. And I can say, I totally agree with you that education is always key. And I think educating everyone is the way forward. I can say that I've learned a lot today, and I talk a lot about mental health, and I teach mental health first aid, and I can now safely say that I will be educating a lot more people, because we all have females in our lives, that understanding, whether we're man or female, understanding how this can affect us and affect our mental health and how we can help another human is key to anything we do. So thank you very much for sharing with me and giving me that education, because I found it very, very interesting as well as inspiring. So
thank you. And also, I would just like to say as well that this story, my story, especially the part around alcohol, is going to be published in the beautiful publication of Woman and Home magazine, which will be going on sale on the 25th of June. And I'm so proud of that.
Amazing. Congratulations on that. It's always good to get that story out as many places as we can. And obviously it will be shared on here. So that draws to end another episode of Hello You. And if you enjoyed this today, it resonates with you, or just find it totally inspiring, please like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being you. This was Hello You, where real conversations create real change. If today's episode moved you, challenged you, or simply made you feel seen, then share it, talk about it, and be part of the ripple. And remember, no matter where you are or what you're facing, you're never alone in this. We're building something together, and there's always room for you. I'm Dan Darwin, and until next time, be kind to your mind, be kind to yourself, and hello, you.